What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a Hero RB draft strategy breakdown. So Hero RB I think is a very viable strategy here in 2024. It's probably one of the two strategies I'm going to go to most often. I think you can definitely build some really solid teams with Hero RB. So I'm just going to be going through some of the general guidelines for this draft strategy, talking about some of the running backs I'd look to target as my Hero RB, and then I'm going to run through 5 different mock drafts, picks at different points in the first round, just kind of showing you what teams you can actually put together with a Hero RB build. So starting off here with some of the guidelines, kind of self-explanatory. You're going to be drafting one hero running back. That's going to be one stud running back within the first 3 rounds, probably more often than not the first 2 rounds, unless you get like a really solid value of someone falling into the third. But your team is going to be anchored by this one stud running back. They are your Hero RB. And at least personally, I want that one running back to have some upside. When you're drafting running backs in the early rounds, they definitely have a little bit more risk than the wide receiver position just because they're more injury prone. So if I'm taking on that risk, I want to have some sort of reward. I want to look at these running backs that do have pretty high ceilings here, guys that can potentially be league winners for you. So one running back in the first 2-3 rounds, you want them to have that upside. And then after you draft that Hero RB, you're pretty much shifting away from the running back position until after the running back dead zone. So most people consider the running back dead zone to be around 4 through 7. You can see this graphic up here. Running back picks in the first 3 rounds have decent returns. It starts to get pretty gross rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. Specifically in rounds 4 and 5, running backs, pretty poor picks. This is data going back to 2017. And also in rounds 4 and 5, wide receivers end up being really strong picks. Within that running back dead zone where you're kind of pivoting away from those running backs, that's where you want to start to hammer other positions. So hammer the wide receivers. I'd also be looking to draft at least one stud quarterback or tight end. You're already kind of punting that running back 2 position a little bit, so you also don't want to end up with like a late round tight end and a late round quarterback. You're just kind of punting too many positions if that's the case. So I'd like to walk away with at least one stud quarterback or one stud tight end. And the elite options I'd consider at those positions for quarterbacks, I think it would be Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Anthony Richardson. And then I'll also throw in guys like Kyler Murray and CJ Stroud. And then for tight end, it would be Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts. And then I think you could also throw George Kittle in there if Brandon Ayuk is gone. If Ayuk sticks around, I personally would not consider George Kittle to be an elite option. So that's kind of like the general guidelines there. I'd also say you ideally have playable wide receivers through your flex +1. So if you can start 2 wide receivers, 2 flexes, I'd like to have 5 wide receivers that are playable, especially if you only have like one stud running back. Your wide receiver position should be, pretty strong heading into the season. And I do want to just preface this, before I dive into some of the targets and some of the mock drafts. You should never go into your draft with one specific strategy. Like, you should not load up your league. You're in the draft room and you're sitting there thinking, all right, I'm doing Hero RB. Like, this is the one specific player I'm going to target. When you do that, you just get locked in. You're going to pass up on value at other positions. It's just way too rigid. You should kind of understand all the different draft strategies, go best player available or close to it within the first few rounds, and then figure out which strategy you want to execute moving forward. So just want to throw that in there. But now let's look at some of the targets, the running backs that I'd be looking for to be my Hero RB. So I think the first 3 running backs off the board, pretty consensus. Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson. This ADP is from 4for4, by the way, just consensus ADP. So I think all 3 of these guys are great options to be your stud Hero RB. CMC at the 101, I'd be buying that price. Breece Hall at the 104. That's where I have them. And then Bijan Robinson at the 106. That's also where I have them. So I think all 3 of those dudes are really solid starts to your draft if you do want to execute Hero RB. Then the running back 4, Jonathan Taylor. At the 110, I don't love it. I'm not picking Jonathan Taylor in the first round. I also just don't think he has a ton of upside. I know that might seem crazy because he's been a running back 1 in previous seasons, but doesn't have a ton of receiving upside. With a rushing quarterback who's going to be vulturing touchdowns, I just don't like the upside for JT, and having to pick him in round 1, not a fan of it. I'd be selling him at that price. Jahmyr Gibbs at the 111, RB5, I like it. I think he has some underrated upside this season. Would be willing to draft him at the 109. Saquon Barkley I actually think is in a very similar spot to Jonathan Taylor. just based on being on an offense that's probably not going to pass a ton to the running backs. There's touchdown questions with Jalen Hurts. I think he's going to be very productive on the ground, but I do not want to buy him here at the 202, so not someone I'd want to run hero RB with. Derrick Henry at the 205, that's just too high for me. Honestly, both like in terms of his running back rank and where he'd be going. I would take Kyren Williams over him. I would take Travis Etienne over him. I would take Achane over him. I think I also bumped up Isaiah Pacheco over him. So there's just a lot of running backs I prefer at this point over Derrick Henry. I think Kyren Williams at the 206 is fine. He gave you 21 plus points per game last year. I don't know if that's like in the range of outcomes this year with Blake Corum, but I still think he's a fine option if you want to run hero RB with him. Travis Etienne at the 209, I don't think he's like the best upside running back, but if you're getting him 2-3 turn area, I think it's fine if you're attacking like wide receiver round 1, round 3. I think it's all right. Pacheco, I think he's a fine value at the 2-3 turn. Another guy where I don't know if that elite upside is there, but can't be too picky where you're at the 2-3 turn area. In my opinion, the most screaming buy is Devon Achane. He's being picked in the early third round, the 302. I think Devon Achane has that crazy upside. You're getting him in the third round, even like late to mid-second. I'm still all over that price tag for Devon Achane, so he's someone I would definitely look to start hero RB, especially if you can grab like a CeeDee Lamb, a Tyreek Hill, get another really solid wide receiver in the second or early third, and then Devon Achane is your hero RB. I think that's a very fun start. And then Josh Jacobs just snuck in here in the third round. Just not someone who I think has that upside. I'm not taking him in the third round. I think this is going to be a committee for the Packers. Even if he is leading it, I just don't know if the upside is there. So those are some of the targets I would be looking at for hero RB. Now let's actually dive into some different mock drafts here. And we're going to start off with a mock draft from the second pick. So the 102 here, CMC went off the board at the 101. CeeDee Lamb is my number 2 overall player. So we snag CeeDee Lamb with the second overall pick. Then we're getting into the 2-3 turn area, and this is a spot where I'm very comfortable picking a guy like Devon Achane. I kind of mentioned how I would love that start, getting a CeeDee Lamb, then getting Devon Achane late round 2, and then getting another really strong wide receiver in Nico Collins in the early third round. I really like that start. I think Devon Achane can anchor a running back position. We also have 2 stud wide receivers to go along with that. Then looking at the 4-5 turn, Trey McBride, definitely a tight end I'm heavily targeting this year, especially in hero RB where you want to hammer the tight end position. Also look for those elite quarterback options, or at least get one of them. Trey McBride, honestly, anywhere like mid-4th or later, I think is a really solid value. I mean, we saw Kelsey and Laporta go in the second round of this mock draft. There's no shot the difference should be that extreme. Then I got T. Higgins, early 5th. Like him there in the 5th round. Rashee Rice, late 6th. Honestly, not looking like he's going to get suspended at this point, so could just be the Chiefs wide receiver 1 at a late 6th round price. I got a solid quarterback here, Kyler Murray, 702. Love the value on Kyler. I like that we have 2 high upside options at quarterback and tight end. Round 8, snag Deontay Johnson. So I could have looked for a running back potentially, in that range. We're outside of the dead zone in round 8, but I like the value on Deontay. And then we get Jaylen Warren in the 9th. And Jaylen Warren is someone who I'm very comfortable targeting to be my running back 2 in hero RB builds. 8th round Jaylen Warren, 9th round Jaylen Warren. I think the value's there. I don't think the difference between him and Najee should be so extreme. They were pretty much neck and neck last year. You can make the argument that Jaylen Warren's the straight up better player. So Najee Harris is going at the 705, and I'm getting Jaylen Warren at the 902. I like that price. Then we just kind of hammer the running back position here. Chase Brown could potentially lead this Bengals backfield, Zach Charbonnet. Then Rico Dowdle, he's someone I talk about in pretty much every video. I think he's a screaming value. I would pick him to just straight up lead this Cowboys backfield over Zeke, and he's going to be going, at least a few rounds after him, couple rounds. Our last wide receiver here is Jalen Polk, and then we wrapped it up with Ray Davis. So this was a spot. We got Kyler at quarterback. I think he has a lot of upside there. Trey McBride, that upside tight end. We have 5 wide receivers that I feel very confident throwing into my starting lineup. So, through the flex +1, that's Deontay Johnson sitting on the bench. And then our running backs, even though we punted the second one until round 9, Achane is the RB1. Jaylen Warren, I think, is a fine running back 2 week to week, but we still have a guy like Chase Brown who could have some weekly value. Rico Dowdle could definitely have some weekly value in a congested backfield. And then more like, handcuff guys, potential committee members in Zach Charbonnet. Ray Davis, and then just like a late round upside wide receiver pick with Jalen Polk. So I really like this draft. Typically, when you think of hero RB, I think you're thinking of like an early round running back pick, a Christian McCaffrey, a Breece Hall, a Bijan Robinson, and that's definitely a very viable start. But I also think Achane is a unique example of someone where you can get him in the second, third round, and it could still be considered a hero RB team with some upside at the running back position. So that was from pick 2. This next mock is going to be from pick 5, and this was a Breece Hall start. So we had CMC go at the 101, 3 wide receivers. We get my 4th overall player here at the 5th spot with Breece Hall. In mid rounds 2 and 3, I got 2 really solid wide receivers in Chris Olave, Deebo Samuel. That Deebo pick's going to look great if Brandon Ayuk ever does get traded. Even if he doesn't, I still think getting Deebo mid 5th is a really solid value. This was another team where we went with a Trey McBride pick. Like I said, mid to late 4th round. I love the value on McBride. We hammer the wide receiver position. Tank Dell mid 5th is insane. Xavier Worthy, love the price there. Rashee Rice, maybe don't love having 2 of those Chiefs wide receivers, but at least one of those dudes is going to smash in my opinion. And then Kyler Murray in the 8th round. 808 Kyler is unbelievable value at the quarterback position. So we're 8 rounds deep. Wanted to get back to the running back position. I think Brian Robinson is another one of these dudes like Jalen Warren, who's a very viable running back 2 in hero RB builds. So we go Brian Robinson, snag Chase Brown again. Jerome Ford, someone who I think early on in the season can plug in as a very solid starter. We'll see how the Nick Chubb recovery looks. Rico Dowdle again, Dontavian Wicks as like that later round young wide receiver upside pick, and then Elijah Mitchell. So once again, solid quarterback, tight end, same as the last one. I think the running back position is pretty strong considering we only went 1 through the first 8 rounds. Breece Hall, Brian Robinson, Chase Brown, Jerome Ford, Rico Dowdle. Like all those dudes could be playable at some point. And then the wide receiver position, 5 guys I'd feel comfortable throwing into my flex with Chris Olave, Deebo Samuel, Tank Dell, Xavier Worthy, and Rashee Rice. So I like the way that one panned out. The next mock is going to be from the 107. This was another Breece Hall start. If you wanted to think about this one a little bit differently, you could just imagine that it was a Bijan Robinson start. I think more often than not, Breece is going to go in front of Bijan, but it didn't happen in this draft, so we drafted Breece Hall, but also would have been totally fine taking Bijan Robinson in this spot. Once again, we're hammering the wide receiver position. We have our hero RB. So I go Drake London, Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors, all guys I'm very confident, picking in that area. Then we switched it up. We did not go Trey McBride this time. He was picked the 404. We actually passed on Mark Andrews to snag Malik Neighbors. I would have been fine taking Andrews there at the 406, but we get a solid value at tight end in the 5th round with Dalton Kincaid going at the 507. So you can see in this specific draft, we did not get an early round elite upside quarterback, which is fine because we got that elite upside tight end. The first 2, we kind of snagged both positions. This one we didn't, but you're going to see our wide receiver positions going to be looking a little bit stronger because then we go Chris Godwin, Hollywood Brown, Keon Coleman. So I mentioned I want to have wide receivers through the flex +1 that I feel confident playing. This specific team, since we didn't snag that elite quarterback option, we have wide receivers through the flex +2. I think, London, Collins, Neighbors, Godwin, Hollywood Brown should all be very solid. Keon Coleman, maybe a little bit more uncertainty, but has a lot of upside as the Bills' potential wide receiver 1. Then we got serious about the running back position. We went Tajay Spears, Chase Brown. I think Spears is playable as a running back 2, probably better off as like a flex option running back 3, but when you punt the position, I think it's fine. Chase Brown, once again, someone in the 10th round, I just love the value on. Honestly, quarterback, I was hoping to like double tap like a Caleb Williams and then a Kirk Cousins or like a Trevor Lawrence, Kirk Cousins, something like that. A lot of quarterbacks went off the board. A lot of people drafted QB2s. Like you had the Mahomes team drafting Jaden Daniels as a quarterback 2, which in my opinion is crazy. Like Richardson team drafting Stafford. So our quarterback position isn't overly strong. I snagged Kirk Cousins in the 11th. And then I was on the clock in the 12th round. And it's like, am I going to pick a Baker Mayfield, like someone in that area? I just threw a dart on Justin Fields. I'm going to do a sleeper video at some point, and Justin Fields is going to be on there. There is no guarantee he's the starter, but you really just can't find that type of quarterback upside that late in drafts. Like typically if a guy's not a starter, even if they become the starter, they're not going to be super fantasy relevant. If you told me Justin Fields was healthy and playing 17 games, you could make the argument that he would go as high as maybe quarterback 5, quarterback 6. Like I feel like he'd be right in there with Anthony Richardson. And I think he has a decent shot of starting at some point during the season. I mean, the reports out of training camp have been extremely positive for him. If you're thinking long term for the Steelers, like Russ isn't going to be your guy long term, or he shouldn't be, at least you have some upside there with Justin Fields. So not saying he's going to be super relevant or that he's going to start off as the starter week one, but in terms of like a late round quarterback flyer, I think you could do worse picks than Justin Fields. And then two other running backs here, Rico Dowdle, Audric Estime, just kind of targeting guys who I think could be in committees, could potentially earn lead roles within their backfield. So I like the way this one played out. I would have liked a little bit stronger of a quarterback room, because if Fields doesn't take over, then you're kind of stuck with just Kirk. You don't have another solid option. But, quarterbacks will always be found on waivers. I'm sure some of these teams will end up dropping their quarterback two at some point. But wide receiver, very strong. Like tight end, I think the running backs are solid for a hero RB team. Into the next one, we have the 110, and this is going to be a Jahmyr Gibbs start. So I snagged Jahmyr Gibbs at the 110. I would take him at the 109, so getting, I guess, like a one-pick discount. We're hammering wide receivers. We go Puka Nacua, early round 2. Even with the injury, I'd still take him there. Deebo Samuel, round 3. We go Jalen Waddle in the 4th. 403 Jalen Waddle is pretty wild. And then we did not go elite tight end in this one. We went elite quarterback. So I snagged Anthony Richardson at the 5'10". Also could have picked Kyle Pitts there at the 5'10 spot. He goes 5'11". Don't hate either one, to be honest, but we went elite tight end last time, so we'll go elite quarterback with this one with Anthony Richardson. Then in round 6, I went with Christian Kirk to be my wide receiver 4. This was the one draft where I did kind of dip into that dead zone area. Like I said, we can't, take all the rules as just like locked in. There's going to be some variance, right? I thought Zamir White going at the 7'10 was a decent value, even though that's technically the dead zone. You can't just punt the entire, area no matter what. So I drafted Zamir White at the 7'10 to be my running back 2. I'm not drafting a ton of Zamir White, but I think that's a very fair price to pay. Then I got back to wide receiver, Calvin Ridley to be my wide receiver 5. Starting to like Calvin Ridley a lot more with DeAndre Hopkins heading into the season injured. I think it just kind of opens things up for him to be the wide receiver 1 and then just hold on to that spot throughout the entire season. My running back 3 was going to be Tajay Spears. Honestly, looking back on it, you could make a very strong argument that I should have taken Christian Watson here. He went at the 9-12. I think I was hoping he fell back to me. He didn't. Honestly, if I was going to run this again, I probably would take Christian Watson because we already had 2 running backs, but I think Tajay Spears, late round 9, is still a fine pick. We start looking at the tight end position. I snagged Pat Freiermuth to be my tight end 1. Obviously, this would be hoping that Brandon Ayuk does not end up with the Steelers. 2 more running backs, Zach Charbonnet, Marshawn Lloyd, and then my tight end 2 with Taysom Hill. Definitely one of my favorite later round tight ends. In that group of guys who probably aren't going to be super relevant, at least Taysom Hill's probably going to have some sort of role week to week, even though one week it's going to be throwing a touchdown, the next one it's going to be catching one, then running one. At least he's doing something for you. And then the final running back here, Bucky Irving, someone who I really like as like a late round running back flyer. So solid quarterback. I think this is probably the strongest running back room, at least with Zamir White as the running back 2. Solid wide receivers, Puka, Deebo, Jalen Waddle, Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley. So wide receivers through the flex, +1. And then tight end position, not great, but if you're waiting, not the worst out there. And then the final spot here, it's going to be from pick 12. This is going to be another Jahmyr Gibbs team. I snagged him at the 112, then I went with Marvin Harrison Jr. at the 201. I did a video yesterday talking about my favorite place to draft. It is definitely not the back end of the first round, so I really don't love this start, just in terms of like compared to what I could get in other positions. But if I had to be drafting from this spot, these are picks that I'd be fine with. 3-4 turn, went with Malik Neighbors and Cooper Kupp. I'd be pretty surprised if Cooper Kupp continued to go with this 3-4 turn area, especially with the Puka injury, but if he's going there, he's definitely going to be a smash pick for me. This is going to be another Anthony Richardson team. Snagged him 5-6 turn. Then we get Christian Kirk again, Ladd McConkey in the 7th, so 5 wide receivers at this point, 1 running back, 1 quarterback. We get Evan Ingram in the 8th. Not a guy I'm taking a ton of, but I think it's a fine pick. 9-10 turn, we went Bijan Robinson, Devin Singletary. I think this was the first team where I snagged Singletary. I don't think he's going to absolutely kill it, but should probably be the lead back on this Giants team. Not going to be a great offense, but lead backs are going to be valuable no matter what team they're on. Then we go Rico Dowdle, Marshawn Lloyd, Dontavian Wicks was like my late round flyer at wide receiver, and then Kamani Vidal to wrap this team up. So 5 wide receivers, 4 through the flex plus 1 that I feel pretty confident with. Like our quarterback, tight end is fine. Running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, Brian Robinson. I think Singletary can be playable. I think Dowdle can be playable. You're hoping Lloyd kind of works his way into the backfield. And then same thing with Vidal. So those are going to be the 5 mock drafts. You can see all the teams up on the screen right here. I think it's definitely a very viable strategy in 2024, especially in leagues where people are very running back hungry. They're reaching for these stud running backs. You can go out, get your stud running back 1, your hero RB, hammer the other positions, rack up a ton of value, and then just kind of, slot in a few dudes who could potentially fill in to be a running back 2. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you haven't seen my double hero RB video, it's up on my channel, so go check it out. I will also have, more draft strategy videos coming out within the next few days. So thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.